They said she couldn't pass a basic swim test. They laughed behind her back, called her a liability, a disgrace, a washed-up soldier dragging through base corridors with empty eyes and a history no one could confirm. But the day she rolled up her sleeve, everything stopped. A single tattoo, obscured by time and sweat, silenced an entire room. It wasn't the design that unsettled them. It was who recognized it. A retired admiral, long thought detached from field politics, stood up and whispered a single question. "Where did you get that emblem?" That moment flipped the script. The woman they mocked might just be the one who'd saved them all, without anyone ever knowing. But how do you reconcile heroism with silence? And who suffers when the truth is too classified to speak? If you've ever felt judged before you were even heard, this story is for you. Stay with us, and if you believe quiet courage deserves to be seen, like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. No one at Navarro Naval Station could remember exactly when the jokes had started, but they'd become routine now, like morning drill or evening roll call. Petty Officer Naomi Blake was always the easiest target. She moved like a ghost, always alone, always silent. Her name came up in every whispered story, always in the wrong context. Some said she'd been pulled off a mission in Yemen. Others whispered darker things. She'd abandoned her team, froze under fire, got people killed. There was never any proof, but no one needed proof when there were enough rumors. In the break room that morning, as she quietly filled her canteen, someone chuckled loud enough for the room to hear. "Better hide your reports. Blake might delete them like she did her unit." Laughter followed, sharp and careless. Naomi didn't flinch. She never did. She simply turned, walked to her seat, and sat. Same way she had every morning. But this time, something changed. Her sleeve caught the corner of her tray and slipped back slightly, just enough for one private to catch a glimpse of black ink. Not a name, not a date. A symbol. Strange, geometric, deliberate. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Hey, what is that?" he asked. But Naomi didn't answer. She pulled the sleeve back down, slowly, and looked straight ahead. Something about that silence made the room colder. Fort Navarro wasn't known for its warmth, the kind of place where winter seemed to settle year-round, not in temperature, but in tone. Naomi Blake walked its corridors like someone halfway between a memory and a ghost. She spoke to no one, not because she didn't want to, but because over time, every word she once tried to say had been sharpened and thrown back at her. Now, silence was easier, safer. The nickname followed her everywhere. Obsidian. It sounded mysterious to new recruits, until they learned it was meant as a joke. Sharp, cold, dark, and buried. Whispers trailed her from the cafeteria to the gear locker. Someone always had something to say. She cracked during a hostage op, one muttered near the vending machines. "Nope. I heard she was supposed to be court-martialed, but they buried it," another replied. Naomi kept walking. She moved through routines with mechanical precision. Her locker was always squared, her boots spotless, her forms flawless. But nothing could polish the scorn in their glances. During drills, her name wasn't called for teams. During meals, no one asked if they could join her table. When jokes were made, they weren't whispered anymore. They were meant to be heard. A recruit once dropped a packet of powdered drink mix on the floor beside her and smirked. "Careful, Blake. Don't want to trigger another international incident." Even the officers didn't stop it. Not really. They looked the other way or laughed nervously, like they didn't want to get involved. It wasn't cruelty that haunted Naomi most. It was the ease of their dismissal. The quiet agreement that someone could be erased, not with orders or law, but with neglect. That's how people disappear, alive, walking, breathing, but gone all the same. It started with sweat. Just another long day in the depot, air thick with dust and heat. Naomi had been sorting pallets of communications gear, her hands moving with practiced care, labeling each crate with exacting precision. She didn't speak. She never did. The others talked over her presence, like she was furniture. Someone joked about classified bananas when she unloaded MREs. Someone else offered fake applause when she lifted a box solo. Naomi didn't flinch. Her focus never wavered. Until a moment of stillness betrayed her. She reached overhead to shift a case of field radios, just enough movement for her sleeve to roll back past her elbow. The ink glinted under a shaft of sunlight. Sharp angles, blackened lines, the suggestion of wings folded inward. It wasn't a name, or a date, or any unit insignia anyone recognized. It looked too intentional, too restrained. One of the newer interns, Private Ellis, froze mid-task. "Hey, what's that?" he said, not loudly, but loud enough. Naomi didn't respond. She lowered her arm slowly and turned away. But it was too late. By the time she walked past the third shelf, Ellis had already snapped a photo. The depot's group chat lit up within minutes. First came the grainy image, zoomed in, filtered, brightened. Then the commentary. "What kind of tattoo is that? Some black ops cult thing? That ain't Navy ink. Looks like something out of DARPA. I heard she used to be CIA and flipped. Or maybe she's just crazy." The story, whatever it was, had legs now. It left the warehouse and bled into mess halls, training fields, even the admin offices. Nobody asked Naomi directly. They didn't have to. Gossip didn't need permission to spread. It only needed fuel. Lieutenant Davis, barely 26 and still green, saw the image on his screen during equipment review. Something in his gut twisted. He didn't know why. The emblem felt familiar, like something he'd seen once in a classified manual he wasn't supposed to open. He hovered his cursor over the photo for a few seconds too long. Then he closed the chat window, looked up, and saw Naomi across the lot, walking alone as always. That night, one more anonymous message hit her phone. "Saw your ink online. Interesting choice." She deleted it without blinking. She'd gotten the tattoo not for pride, not for attention, but to remember the silence she owed to the fallen. It was never meant to be seen. But sometimes, symbols don't stay buried, especially when the wrong people start to recognize them. 18 months earlier, the sun burned down on a different desert, one that didn't belong to any nation by name, though every intelligence agency in the world had a stake in its soil. They called it Operation Obsidian Route. No press releases, no medals, no return flights. Naomi Blake had been pulled from her regular unit with no explanation and no goodbye. She was given a new name, new orders, and one impossible directive: intercept a rogue nuclear asset before it triggered full-scale conflict between Israel and Iran. Intelligence had confirmed that a shipment of prototype warhead cores had gone missing, believed to be in transit across a disputed zone. If they were detonated or leaked, the escalation wouldn't be contained. Naomi and her 6-person infiltration team were told, in plain language, that this mission might be all that stood between diplomacy and World War III. For 12 days they moved as ghosts. No uniforms, no signals, just grit. Maps burned after reading, and coordinates whispered over encrypted satellite bands. At checkpoint 17, the operation shifted. What was supposed to be a handoff turned into an ambush. The convoy had been compromised. The device wasn't a bomb, it was bait, a trap designed to expose whoever came for it. Bullets carved the air like static. Dust choked the lungs, and one by one her team was pinned, cut down, or bled out, trying to buy seconds Naomi could not waste. She found the courier, a young diplomatic attaché who'd stolen the payload not to sell, but to hide it. His face was bloodied. His ribs were broken. But he held the key code with trembling fingers and whispered, "If I die, they win." Naomi didn't run. She didn't radio for help. There was no signal left. She dragged him across 2 kilometers of dry concrete and alley rubble to a secondary evac point marked on a map she'd memorized but never expected to use. The helicopter wasn't supposed to wait, but it did. She forced him onto it, then turned back to lay down covering fire with half a mag and a wounded shoulder. When the dust cleared, the evac crew called in a casualty. But it wasn't her. 4 days later, Naomi emerged from the Syrian border checkpoint, sunburned, silent, and walking under her own power. The debriefing took 7 hours. Every detail was classified, redacted, and sealed. Operation Obsidian Route officially did not occur. Her file was altered. Her name was erased. Her heroism buried in favor of political deniability. And Fort Navarro became her exile. Paperwork stamped with just enough disgrace to explain her demotion, but not enough truth to protect her dignity. She stayed quiet because the truth wasn't hers to speak. That was the cost of Obsidian Route. Silence, in all its forms. Naomi had accepted it. Or at least, that's what she told herself when the days got too long and the looks too sharp. But silence has gravity. It pulls at everything, slow and steady, until you forget what voice even feels like. 2 weeks after the tattoo photo made its rounds, Naomi was alone again in the far bay of the warehouse, sorting outdated comms equipment, with the kind of focus reserved for people trying not to think. The air was heavy, the light flickering, and she moved like a machine. Note, stack, repeat. Inside a forgotten supply pouch, she found a crumpled operations memo from years ago, edges torn, ink faded. Someone had scribbled over it with a green marker. It wasn't a coordinate, not this time, but a phrase. Tier 6, untraceable. Below it, the same winged symbol, hers. Not handwritten, but stamped, official, unmistakable. Her hands tensed. For a moment she just stared. She didn't need context. The system that silenced her had left fingerprints all over the things it wanted forgotten. She snapped a photo using an old burner phone she kept hidden in a foam insert under her gear. She typed one line. They still don't recognize the emblem. How long do I wait? The reply came fast. Truth has momentum. Let it build. Momentum. It didn't feel like momentum. It felt like drowning in cement. But still, she pushed the memo back into the pouch and sealed the crate shut like nothing happened. On her way out, she passed a cluster of officers who didn't speak to her. Didn't nod. Didn't even glance. But one of them paused, as if something in him itched to remember, and didn't. That evening, a group of recruits in the chow hall uploaded a parody video of her tattoo. Some fake sci-fi decoding bit. One leaned into the camera. It's not even real. Probably a barcode from the clearance bin. Naomi watched it in silence, not out of fear or shame, but because some truths don't scream to be heard. They wait, patiently, until someone's ready to listen. The arrival was unannounced, just like always. Admiral Gregory Harlan didn't believe in advance notice. He believed in pressure, the kind that exposed cracks. After 4 decades in naval intelligence, he'd learned that problems didn't live in reports. They hid in routines, in warehouses, in the way silence pooled around certain names. Navarro Naval Station had heard he might come later that year. No one expected him mid-week, mid-month, with no motorcade and no warning. His presence triggered a controlled panic. Uniforms straightened, logs double-checked, conversations filtered through clenched teeth. But Harlan wasn't there for ceremony. He was there to wander, to feel. And that's how he ended up in the back corner of Warehouse C, where Naomi Blake was restocking batteries like it was the only thing holding her together. He watched her for almost a minute before speaking. There was something about her movement, efficient, precise, almost too precise. Soldiers going through the motions didn't move like that. Operators did. She reached for the top shelf, and her sleeve pulled back again. He froze. That emblem. The angular black design shaped like a broken wing. It wasn't in any public registry, but he'd seen it once, deep inside a black site briefing, behind 2 levels of clearance, Obsidian Route. Tier 6, no attribution. He stepped forward, voice low but cutting through the quiet like a rifle crack. Petty Officer Blake, he said, watching her straighten instinctively, like someone who hadn't been addressed properly in months. She turned slowly, posture stiff, alert. Where did you get that emblem? Her eyes met his, calm but unreadable. There was no hesitation, no stutter. Obsidian Route, sir. 7 in. 1 out. The warehouse went still. Even the ventilation seemed to pause. Admiral Harlan stared at her, the weight of her words anchoring the space between them. He knew what that meant. He knew exactly what that meant. She wasn't disgraced. She wasn't unstable. She was the last standing shadow of a mission that had never officially existed. Behind him, Lieutenant Davis appeared, clipboard in hand, unaware of what he was interrupting. Harlan didn't look away. "Lieutenant," he said, voice clipped. "Bring me her real file. The Black Archive. Now." Davis hesitated. "Sir, I don't think I have clearance." "You do now." And with that, everything Naomi had buried began to stir from the dark. Lieutenant Davis returned 27 minutes later, breath shallow, hands trembling around a folder marked with a classification stamp he'd never even seen before. Admiral Harlan took it without a word and opened it right there in the middle of the warehouse. No desk, no office. Just concrete floors and fluorescent lighting buzzing overhead. The first page confirmed what he already suspected. Naomi Blake was no warehouse clerk. She was the last active operator of a Tier 6 initiative, buried so deeply that half the Pentagon couldn't pronounce it, let alone access it. He read in silence, jaw tightening with each paragraph. Details of Operation Obsidian Route, her unauthorized adjustments to mission protocol that prevented nuclear escalation between Iran and Israel, her evacuation of the diplomatic courier, her covering fire under ambush, her voluntary surrender of extraction to ensure the payload made it across the border, and then nothing, a reassignment to Navarro. A disciplinary mark citing emotional instability and unfit for strategic deployment. The cover story. The lie. Harlan looked up slowly. Around him, the air had changed. A few warehouse staff had gathered near the doorway, pretending not to watch. The petty insults that once followed Naomi's steps had vanished. In their place, silence, raw and uneasy. Harlan spoke loud enough for every corner of the room to hear. "Petty Officer Blake," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "This institution owes you an apology." "I owe you an apology." Naomi stood at attention, spine rigid, jaw firm. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. "We failed to protect your name while you protected our country," he continued, voice heavy, not with theatrics, but regret. Around them, the younger sailors shifted, eyes dropping, hands tightening into fists of shame. They had mocked her, filmed her, laughed at a woman who had done more in one mission than most of them would in their entire careers. Davis stepped forward, face flushed. "Sir, I witnessed harassment. I should have reported it. I should have asked questions." Harlan held up a hand. "No, Lieutenant. You should have trusted your gut. All of you should have. The truth now spoken aloud, had weight. And Naomi, who had carried that weight in silence, didn't demand vindication. She simply nodded once, controlled, disciplined, and unshaken. Because some reputations are rebuilt not through words, but through the collapse of every false narrative that once replaced them. There were no cameras, no flags, just a cold conference room with mismatched chairs and a carafe of stale coffee. No one touched. Admiral Harlan had made it clear. This wasn't about ceremony. It was about setting the record straight, face to face, with no edits. Naomi stood in the uniform that had once been hers and was now, finally, hers again. No ribbons pinned, no applause cued, just the truth waiting to be acknowledged. Harlan read from a sealed folder, the words slow, deliberate. Petty Officer First Class Naomi Blake is officially recognized for exceptional valor during Operation Obsidian Route. Her actions directly prevented an international escalation. All prior disciplinary actions are revoked. Her file will be restored, corrected, and permanently sealed under Tier 6 protocol. He stepped toward her and opened a small black case. Inside, the Bronze Star and a Defense Superior Service Medal. Naomi looked down, but didn't take them. "This changes nothing for them," she said quietly. "No," Harlan agreed, "but it changes something for us." Across the room, Davis stood, stiff with guilt. "Ma'am," he began, voice uneven, "I let the rumors spread. I didn't stop it. I didn't speak up. And I regret that, more than I can say." Naomi turned her head just slightly. "You regret it now. That matters more than pretending you didn't laugh." She let that hang in the air, then added, calm and clear, "Your leadership starts here. Let no one under your watch be erased the way I was." Davis swallowed hard, nodded once. No one clapped. No one cried. But the silence didn't feel empty this time. It felt earned, like ground retaken after a long retreat, not a victory, but a reckoning. 3 weeks later, they offered her a choice. She could return to special operations, back to missions, back to adrenaline, back to anonymity wrapped in valor. Or she could transfer to any unit of her choosing. Naval Intelligence, Pentagon Advisory, Diplomatic Security. The list was long, impressive, tailored to her skills. But Naomi didn't hesitate. "I want the Warrior Transition Unit," she said. There was a pause on the other end of the table. The officer reviewing her reinstatement file looked up, confused. "Ma'am, with your background, that's, well, medical support, rehab, paperwork. That's not where Tier 6 operators go." "I know," she replied calmly. "That's exactly why I'm asking." The request made its way up the chain, hesitated at Harlan's desk, then finally landed in front of him in person. "Your skills are wasted in therapy," he told her flatly, eyes scanning her new orders. "You could lead half the Pacific Fleet's intelligence arm. Why this?" Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I spent 18 months being erased by the system I served. I've met men and women who disappeared without ever leaving the room. I know what that feels like. And I know how to speak their language." He studied her for a long moment before signing the papers. "Sometimes," he said, "the best healers are the ones who had to survive without one." She didn't smile. But there was something in her stillness that felt resolute. The kind of peace you don't find after victory, but after endurance. And so, with no press, no headlines, and no parade, Petty Officer Naomi Blake quietly transferred to a facility in South Dakota, where the wounded came not just for treatment, but for understanding, where silence wasn't punishment anymore, but permission to begin again. The air in South Dakota was different, cleaner, quieter, untouched by orders and rank. Naomi walked the perimeter of the small facility each morning, same as she had during deployment, not from habit, but from duty. The veterans who came through her doors didn't wear their scars. Their wounds lived in silence, in glances, in long pauses, in the way they checked exits without thinking. She never asked them for stories. She waited until they were ready. One afternoon, a young woman arrived. Army Ranger, maybe 24. Sharp jaw, steady hands, but eyes that had seen too much. She sat across from Naomi during intake, fingers tapping the side of her leg like Morse code. "I heard about you," she said finally. "Online, the tattoo." "The warehouse, all of it." Naomi said nothing. Instead, she rolled up her sleeve. The emblem, now faded but unhidden, caught the light. The young woman's voice cracked. I think I need someone who understands." Naomi nodded once, then leaned forward, voice soft but steady. "Tell me what you can't tell anyone else." That night, as fire crackled in the pit behind the center, Naomi sat among others like her, veterans of missions that never made it to headlines. No ceremony, no recognition. Just truth, shared in fragments. And in that quiet, something began to heal.